Welcome back to Modern Aikidoist podcast, everybody. I know it's been a little bit since I've had an episode out. Things have gotten really busy for me in a very good way. I'm up to some very exciting things, a number of different exciting things. But I've never strayed too far from my Aikido because I really do love it. And one of the reasons that it's been a little while is I've been thinking about the next podcast and the next subject, and I kind of opened up a bigger can of worms than I could really organize and want to be able to do in a even 60 to 90 minute podcast, because it just touches on so many different things. But I always, when thinking about training, I try to drill down to making sure what I'm doing is focused on what I want, what I want to get. And I want to bring that to the topic today of making your martial art your own. What is it that makes your martial art yours? And I know I'm addressing people of all different interests when it comes to their martial art, and all different levels. So I don't want to specialize on just one, but I want to cover something for everybody. And that is kind of touches on the Shu-Ha-Ri principle, basically a beginner, intermediate, and then a free form or more advanced practitioner. Because when it comes to making your martial art your own, when you start out, you really have very little basis to go from. You want to learn and absorb from your teachers as directly as possible. You're not adding in your own flavor, your own interpretations, even if you're coming from another art. Maybe you're an advanced martial artist in another art and you want to learn a new one. The last thing you want to do is show disrespect to the instructor and the school that you're in by bringing all of your other experience in and then trying to apply it to something completely different. And I know I experienced that when I started Aikido. I had a pretty strong martial background in a couple of other different realms, and it was important to my mind to say, you know what, I want to absorb what Aikido has to offer, not say, well, I already know this, so I'm not gonna, that would be an obstacle in my own head for me to absorb the beauty that was Aikido and what it had to offer. And so what I found as I got along, though, is, I think I was fairly successful at clearing the slate of my brain and be open to the new lessons of what Aikido was offering. As I got to understand those more, I could start to see how those things that I could take from Aikido and make into my art started to emerge. They didn't come on suddenly. It took some time, several years, for these things to start to become the lessons of Aikido to be absorbed, so that I could internalize them and then work with how I would make my art, which would be heavily influenced by Aikido, but also influenced by my other martial experiences, and then the martial experiences I wanted to further explore later. There is a very common principle, especially within the Japanese arts, where it says study many and learn none. And and there's some criticism often of people that dedicate themselves to one art, and they say, I am going to study this art alone. It has everything I need, and there's nothing else any other art has for me. When you're beginning, yes, that can be a problem to try to study martial arts, many martial arts at the same time. It makes it much, much harder, I think, to absorb. It's better to learn one thing pretty well before you start adding in other influences. That is to say, though, I don't think you should be stuck with one art and limit yourself permanently from any other influence. I believe there's a spectrum from one side to the other. In fact, as an example of that, I met a young martial artist years ago, and he was very passionate, very motivated, and he would seek out many different teachers, many instructors. And he was not in a rigid school or traditional school, if you want to call it that frowned on him going and learning from other people. The realm he was in, learning from multiple people, even just for an hour or two, was fairly common. But he never really had should we say, an anchor or a mentor or a set of instructors or seniors to him that gave him a good foundation. His mind was much like a very moldable clay. he would go and he would talk to, a senior or a mentor instructor. And for about 2 hours, he'd say, okay, I want to do exactly what you're doing. Show me everything. And he was very much a sponge, the which is great. I mean, that is dedication. I'd say probably 80 or 90% of martial arts students don't have to go out and find an instructor and say, all right, show me, help me. I'm here to learn, and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And that's great. The issue was when he would leave that instructor and he'd go to the next instructor, he'd completely clear his brain off and say, okay, I want now you show me everything. And he spent his time traveling from instructor to instructor to instructor. And I mean, I think he went through probably dozens of them, but he never found his art while he was doing this. And it's been a few years since I've crossed his path, so I never followed up to see where he was at. If he finally started realizing, okay, well, what's mine? What is, now that I've gathered all these things, I don't know, did he sift through them to find the stuff that really fit him and that he made work very well? But that lesson, I think, is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum of a lot of what we'd call traditional martial arts students, where they say, I'm going to go to my dojo, I'm going to go to my school, I'm going to listen to my instructor or my instructors. That's it. I'm not going to go to visit other schools. I'm not going to train with other martial artists. God forbid, I'm going to go train another martial art. That's right out. So I think those are kind of the two extreme ends of the spectrum. I think in the middle is where you find yourself, the peak of the mountain, not so much down around the perimeter at the base. You need the base to get to the top. That's where you have to start. But as you get to the top, and they often say, all martial arts meet at the peak. Down at the base is where you get, martial arts that specialize in one thing on one side, another thing on another side, and yet something else on a third side or fifth side or eighth side, or, however it goes. But every time I go to train, I always think, what do I need to do today that's going to get me closer to that peak that I'm looking for my art that fits me? And it needs to fit not only my body type, my age, my physical limitations, whether they be injuries or, what have you, my height. There's certain things I can do that somebody who's shorter has a hard time doing. There are weaknesses and vulnerabilities I have. I'm always been very lean. I'm pretty strong for my size, but I don't have the strength of somebody that weighs another 40, 50 pounds of muscle. I have to take that into account for what I want for my art. And this is one of the topics that kind of brought me to this. And in the next episode, I'm planning to go more into some details of, all right, what did I do when I actually got onto the mat, or what am I thinking about, what works for me? But I wanted to take a step back and look and share globally what it's like to take responsibility for your training. And this, I believe, is a common problem with commercial martial arts. There is the business influence where a school does not want you to go to another school because maybe you'll enjoy their training more than you enjoy the training you're getting here. So there's a competition level that, driven by money and revenue, that is perhaps limiting you as a student. An attitude, and that attitudes are contagious. You get into a group that has a certain attitude, and you will start taking that attitude on. I mean, we're human beings are social that way. We want to fit in, and in order to fit in, we take on the attitudes of the group that's around us. That's why we have to be careful of the attitudes that we surround ourselves with, because we will absorb them whether we like them or not. And so even if you are that person that is in a fairly structured school and they discourage you outside training, that's fine. There's still room for you to take responsibility for your training. Basically, consider it your ambition level. What is it you want? Just showing up and listening to the instructor and going home does not cut you making your art your own. It won't even put you in the ballpark. What it really takes is for you to show up to that class with your passion, as you are taught the art from you. You probably won't have it from the beginning of having a vision of exactly what you want, because you don't have the experience yet to really see it. But you can have the passion from the very first day you walk in the door. You can say, I want to be good at this. And what that means to you exactly, it won't be clear yet. And that's fine. But when you come in, you're driven to get to as many classes as you can. You're driven to try everything that you are shown, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Try it, dedicate yourself to it, listen, work with your fellow students, your seniors, even the people that are newer than you are. You will learn something from every single one of them. These are the elements of taking responsibility for your martial art. And what I noticed, a big part of that when I first started traditional martial arts, as you would normally think of them, or commercial martial arts, call it that. I was a teenager, and I had a young mind. I had no idea about how really things worked. I showed up. I went through the motions I was told and everything. I had to learn just by noticing. All right, certain students were really good, really proficient, and others you could see were just going through the motions. They spent the same amount of time, but they did not have, you could tell just by looking that they did not have the same skill set as others did. And I wanted to know why. And I had to, as a young teenager, sort out, well, what's the difference? It's not the number of reps they're doing. It's not the number of classes they attend. What is it? And it is the heart. It is their ambition and drive, their desire, their passion. Just showing up. Yeah, you don't get better by not showing up. That's flat out true. However, just being in the room doesn't mean you're there. Doesn't mean you're present. It doesn't mean you're mindful of what you're doing. And so it's important to make sure that every time you step on the mat, every time you go into your dojo, you go in with the right attitude and you go in with the right mindset. This sounds like basic motivation stuff, and a lot of times it is, but it can be a healthy reminder because it's easy to slide into comfort. This is the biggest danger of martial art training, is when you get with fellow students and seniors and instructors, you become kind of comfortable. You know what each can do. You know what each doesn't like to do. You want to stay away from what they don't like to do because you don't want to get anybody angry, and you all gently slip into a comfort zone. And you don't grow by sitting in a comfort zone. And so this is an aspect of taking that responsibility and making your art your own. You should always be striving for what you can't do yet, or what you do poorly, or what you maybe do pretty well, but that's not good enough. You need to do it very well. And don't put the entire responsibility of taking stock of where you are and getting you to that next step. Don't put all of that on your instructor, because sometimes, in fact, oftentimes, instructors don't keep as close tabs on students as like a coach would. A coach will ride a student and say, here's where you are, here's where you need to improve. Let's hammer on this. And you need to follow through, whether that's go home and you do drills, you do practice, you do in your own time, you make the improvements. Or it may be on the mat where you have to be mindful of things that, a lot of instructors won't notice or point out, such as your breathing or something that's very minute. I mean, imagine having, 20, 30 people that you're watching and having to watch all the little minute parts of everything that all of the students are doing. I don't think any instructor can do that. Some are better than others, obviously, but you are going to be the first one to catch when you're doing something incorrect, when you could be doing it better. That is the mindfulness of making your art your own. And I'm not talking about which techniques you decide work better for you. That would and should happen naturally. You will just discover, wow, this thing really clicks for me and it seems to work. I can get this to work on just about everybody. Versus techniques is, I struggle with this. 3/4 of the time I do it, I screw it up. Well, now that's risky. And so you'll find that you'll get those, we used to call them hip pocket techniques, where, if you knew you were under stress, you'd have a high confidence, level with them, their high percentage, and low risk. If it does go wrong, it's not going to leave you completely screwed. That is an excellent mindset to go explore if you decide to do that, to go explore other arts, find out other things, because I guarantee you every martial art has got their own very high percentage, low risk, great techniques that are, I like to call them bread and butter. They're not the sexy, flashy, super cool looking John Wick stuff. They are the, I need to get business done, right now. And to find those, and then find the ones that fit you, that fit in with your body, your mindset, your previous training, your art. What you'll find is as you do that, your previous training will actually help. It will help you merge together into a martial art that is your own. And I just say this personally, for everybody that says don't go train other things, I call that just garbage. It's just bad advice. And it usually comes out of ego. It comes out of the big fish in a little pond syndrome. Or I don't know, it just a limited worldview. There is so much to learn and so much to explore. Why would you limit yourself by, the little fishbowl that you're in? And that's the thing about, I guess, life in general. Almost all the time, it's not the other person saying, don't go explore. It's believing them. That is a prison that we build with our own minds on somebody else's suggestion, but it is only a suggestion. It is not a command. And yes, I know some instructors in schools are pretty strict, but that over the last 50 years, I think has shifted. I'm seeing a shift in attitudes generally that are more open to collaboration, more open to the exposure of other martial arts and other martial artists. Whenever I've gone, I've had a great time meeting practitioners from other martial arts, training with them, learning from them. It's been a splendid experience. I enjoy doing it a great deal. I like hearing the different perspectives and finding out, well, the main two things, the stuff that we have in common, which is we have more in common with other martial arts than we have disagreements. And we will find it, we build the bonds by finding out what we have in common. We build ourselves by finding out what the differences are. And those differences are often things that we are lacking. When another martial art does something that we don't do, that oftentimes is a hole or a vacancy of something within my art that really should be there. At least that's how I've found, how I've looked at it. And of course, just like, Bruce Lee recommended, which I think is absolutely true, is, collect a lot of things, reject the stuff that's not useful, keep what's useful, and that becomes your art. I think that that's absolutely true. There's great wisdom in that. And you should not have fear of saying, this thing that I was taught, maybe it's from my art that I've chosen to be mine. It just doesn't, I can't quite get it to work for me. I'll keep trying, but this isn't my art, doesn't fit me. Maybe like it fits my instructor. He does it really well. And it just doesn't come to me, but I've got techniques that I do either within my art or from other arts that do work really well for me, and they don't work well for him or her. All of that stuff is fine. I think something to keep in mind is that we do need to have a certain amount of individuality and independence with the study of our art. Yes, we are all together, whether it's in the same dojo, in the same organization, in the same art, that's fine. We're all kind of heading the same direction, but never give up your own identity or give up the idea that you mustn't be different than what everybody else is doing. And in this sense, I find that things like all dressing alike tends to get that, what they call it, conformity mindset. I've got to be like everybody else. I've got to dress the same. I've got to do everything, the same. We got to all move the same. Well, even a child understands the difference between somebody who's bigger and somebody who's smaller, somebody who's heavier, somebody who's lighter. They're not going to move the same. The similar, sure, but not exactly the same. And that holds true with mindset as well. There are people that are assertive that will have techniques that really fit them like a glove, and you'll have people that are more passive minded, patient, that the assertive techniques won't feel right for them, whereas they'll have techniques that do fit their mindset and feel comfortable, and they'll make them work reliably. That's to me what finding your art is. So as with most of life, we are our own worst enemies, and that includes not limiting yourself when you have no other influence that would limit you. Take away those limitations and explore and make your art your own. And that comes down not just to, how you think at a high level, but every time you step on the mat, what can I do today in this session to help me build my skills? And if you think that because you're going into a structured class and your instructor is leading it, that you can't have or exercise that mindset, that's not true. You certainly can. And I've seen it. I've seen, again, like a spectrum. When I would usually go in, I knew the things I wanted to work on, even with a given technique. It's not that I would just say, okay, we're going to learn Shio-nage today, or we're going to practice Kotegaeshi. It would be, here's exactly what I want, the best footwork I can get, so I'm always in the right place. I want to work on my timing. I want to work on how I integrate my breathing into my technique. I want to work on how I control my eyes, how I can control zanshin, how I can, make every ingredient, because you got to admit, technique, there's a lot of ingredients to it. We all say that there's a few crucial ones, but even if those are right, there's a bunch of other ones that if they're not quite right, your technique won't be good. It won't be solid. It won't be reliable. So work on those, have a focus on those. What I found is that I would train with, a partner, my uke, who would be more of a mindset like mine. And our reps we would cut down the time in between them, and we would just hammer and go, and we'd try to get in, we would not waste time. Then there was, on the other end of the spectrum, I found people that like to do a technique, and then they'd start to chat about, well, I think I did this a little wrong, and I would, well, maybe I should do it. And they would just kind of gab and chat. And if, we were practicing a certain technique for, 8 to 10 minutes, we'd, with a partner like that, we'd get in, maybe 10 reps. Whereas when I would do it with somebody who was more of my mindset, in the 8 to 10 minutes, we'd be doing 50 to 100 easily. And not that I'm criticizing the one who wants to analyze or chat. I mean, some people can start gabbing about non-martial art training stuff, which that kind of bugs me. But the idea that the feeling I got was they weren't there so much for really honing their skills, because they were not as dedicated, or their focus was not in a productive zone, at least for what I felt was productive for myself. So when you take on your training, you don't need to have an instructor that forms the exact class that you need. He's just providing the kind of the canvas and the colors. It's up to you to paint the painting, and you can do it lackadaisically. You can do it, as with your passion and ambition. But that's going to get you to build your art. You're going to find out what's comfortable for you, find out what's not. And I've also met those people that when they take on a martial art, they take it on kind of like like a librarian. Okay, well, here's the entire curriculum of this art. I want to know every kata. I want to know every technique. I want to know how to do, and they basically go through it, by the numbers, and they go, okay, I want to work on this one so I can understand it. I want to work on this one. And they just kind of build everything up together with the idea that they are there to memorize all the material. And, there's nothing wrong with that. It's more of an academic approach, but they often overlook taking stock of the things that really work for them if they really needed it, to defend themselves, or even just to say, yeah, I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And or maybe they kind of get a feeling of those and they come in and they say, I just want to work with what I'm good at because that's what feels good. And again, that's slipping into a comfort zone. And we have to be careful of that. It's when you work on things you're not good at to become good at them. Now you're getting into, is this going to be my art or is this not? And I will say after, 20 years of Aikido training, there are certain techniques that I still don't. I've just kind of written them off. Not that I won't ever train them, but I realize they're not going to be for me. And the same thing with stuff from other arts too. Maybe because it doesn't fit like a self-defense type of a situation, which is really what my personal training is focused primarily on. Although I do like doing technique just for its own sake, because they can be fun to do, fun to train. I still like that somewhat, but every time I go there, I have to classify in my mind, say, okay, I have to remember this is not what I would use, if things really start getting sticky, for real. But that's just me. Everybody can have kind of their own approach and mindset. But what I wanted to come across in this podcast was, not only is it okay to make your art your own, you have a commitment to do that, or I should say you have an obligation to do that. And whatever that winds up being, at least define it, at least have it be your focus. Because if you don't have that, what'll happen is you will probably burn out, get bored, or just think, I'm wasting my time. You'll be aimless. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing this. Maybe you got into an art because your instructor was very charismatic and you just kind of want to be around them and thinking that you're just going to absorb their skills and their cool factor or whatever. And you realize, what am I doing? I'm just hanging out here. And, I think some of these things are reasons why the martial arts have such a high attrition rate. So many people drop out because they have not been given I think what is the formula for enjoying the art and having it be truly nourishing to them, their bodies and their minds and their spirit. Because the people that stick around in martial arts and it becomes their life, they have figured that out. But for those people that haven't, I think that they should be shown, which is why I wanted to convey this to you and to everybody. And feel free if you would like to share this to somebody who's, maybe struggling. They're taking martial arts, but they don't feel like they're getting much out of it, or they're not excited about it. Everybody that I've met that's been excited about their art has figured out that formula about making their art their own. And that's, I think, very important. So thanks for sticking with me today. I want to keep this one a little shorter, but I wanted to share that with you. And I've got another podcast here coming up. So I want to thank everybody for your support, especially in this last 6-8 months. I know things have been kind of paced out a little bit for space between episodes, but glad to kind of be back with it. And I want to start getting a little bit more out to you guys. But in the meantime, get back on the mat, have the right mindset, and you're going to love it and enjoy your training. Take care.